Hey, what's going on everyone? This is Nick. Today I'm going to be talking to you about how to make a trio recording on a budget. This is another YouTube video where I'm not going to be playing guitar, so please bear with me. My hands are going to be doing some weird stuff. So ever since I started playing music, the idea of trios really appealed to me. From power trios like Cream or the Jimi Hendrix Experience, even in Led Zeppelin where they're their own kind of power trio with the singer on top, that's always really appealed to me. Then when I started playing jazz, trios really started interesting me. Groups like the Jim Hall Trio, the Bill Evans Trio, Gilad Hexelman's Trio, Ari Honig's Trio, chordless trios like Walter Smith III, Kenny Garrett's Triology. The idea of trios has always appealed to me because it's like sort of a perfect combination of three. To me, it's always been insane in how you can get such a big sound from such a small group. It's only 3 people. But for me, 3 people is the perfect amount of people because you can interact freely with those 3. So eventually when I studied how to record and mix music, I learned that trio recordings came really natural to me. I think partially it's because I spent so much time listening to trios and playing in trio formats that the only thing left was to learn the technical sides. So today I'm going to be basically walking you through a few budget ways of recording trio and how to get a really nice sound. If you've seen my video on my composition Gaslight, one of the recordings I did was actually based in my living room with minimal acoustic treatment, and in my opinion, the results, it was pretty good. So now I'm going to dive into a few techniques, but first I want to give a disclaimer saying that these are not the perfect ways and these are not the only ways to record trio. These are just ways that I found helpful, and in my opinion there's not one way to record things, it all depends on the scenario. So please use your judgment on this, and if you disagree with any of these methods or you have a better way of doing it, please leave a comment down below. And as always, if you find this video helpful, please like and subscribe. I'm putting out new videos every Monday, so tune in. If you need some help mixing, check out my website down in the link below, and fill out the contact form or shoot me a message. So let's get into it. So I'm going to be talking about a few mics throughout the course of this video. I just want to note that all the mics I'm going to talk about are going to be under $200 and some are going to be less than $100, and I'm really going to try to make this an all-inclusive budget guide on how to record trio. So one of the first and most important things is isolation. Is getting all of the instruments isolated so that way you could mix all the instruments properly and they could sit well in the balance. So isolation can be kind of expensive, but there's a few makeshift options that you can use in order to still get a good sound. I personally built my own panels out of towels. So I saw this YouTube video that basically went through and tested a bunch of household materials, and they checked which material provides the most isolation, and apparently the most isolated one was towels. So for this, I literally got a piece of wood, chopped it up, made a box, stuffed it with towels, and I put nails through it. This actually provides a lot of support and isolation and is perfect for guitar amps. So if you're a guitar player who's recording, I would recommend this even if you're not recording in trio, to just get rid of the room sounds. I have it set up on my amp all the time. So the first method that I would recommend is actually one that Adam Neely brought up in a video that I was featured in, where he talks about everyone using their phone to record. So basically the method is you're going to put your phone on the speaker of the amp, the speaker of the bass amp, and somewhere on the drums. So for all of these things, positioning is going to be super key, and it's going to get you the best sound. So it's really important for you to really experiment and try to find the best placement. For drums, some places you might look might be directly overhead if you have some kind of phone stand that you can put over. If you don't have some kind of stand, then maybe right above the bass drum pointing at the snare, or if you're playing more jazz oriented music or cymbal oriented music, then maybe at the height of the cymbals. I've also had success with putting mics behind the cymbals, so really it's up to you. You can kind of try it a few different ways, but that method works out great because then you have 3 separate sources to use when capturing audio. So if you're using a camera or you're using someone else's phone, you can actually still use the audio from that and blend it in as a room sound. One trick that I do is I put reverb on that, and it's kind of a way to get a live feeling from it and make it sound a little more natural. So that would be the first and most budget method, but I think it works out pretty well. Now I'm going to go on to a few miking techniques. So for this one, you're going to need some kind of interface, preferably with 4 channels or more. If you have an 8 channel, that's perfect, but we want to work with what we have. For this next method, I recommend using electric bass because in my opinion, the DI sounds of an electric bass sound a lot nicer than the DI sounds of an upright bass. If you still really want to use an upright bass, you can still get DI from the upright bass, but it's going to sound a bit inorganic and it's going to sound kind of like an electric bass anyway, so in my opinion, maybe just go for the electric bass. But anyway, so this method only takes 3 mics. Basically, you're going to have 1 mono overhead, you're going to have 1 mic on the guitar, and the bass is going to be going DI. So it's really similar to the iPhone approach in that 1 mic is capturing each source, but now since we're using microphones, the quality is going to tend to be a little more professional. As far as mics go to record this, there's a few options that I really like. For guitar, a few budget options are the SM57, which retails for about $100. There's the Sennheiser 609, also about $100. That one's nice because you can actually just drape it over the amp and get it on the speaker. Then there's also ribbon mics, which usually sound really nice on guitar. There's the Cascade Fathead, which is only $160, which is super affordable for usual ribbon mic prices. And then there's also the Golden Age R2 ribbon mic, which is also about $160. Those are a few mics that I like for guitar, and for your drum mono overhead, I usually recommend some kind of large diaphragm condenser. If you look for MXL mics, they're really inexpensive. If you go to shopgoodwill.com, you can find an offer really easily. I got this MXL 990 for about $30, and I think like $5-10 in shipping. But overall, a really inexpensive mic. You can also check out a mic like the Audio-Technica 2020, which is a great all-around mic for about $100. And yeah, I would basically put one mic on the guitar amp, one mic as an overhead, and then bass DI. Now for the positioning this, I would honestly recommend putting the mono overhead somewhere above the snare, facing right down. And then I'll take some time and move it around. If I feel that there's not enough cymbals being captured, I'll move it closer to the cymbals, so kind of over the bass drum in between two cymbals. Or if I feel like there needs to be more toms, I'll put it somewhere close between the snare and the toms. So move it around and try to find the best place to put it. If you can find some kind of omnidirectional mic, that would also work too, because then it'll capture the whole kit. If you're recording at home, I would recommend honestly putting the mic kind of low, because I'm guessing that your room might not be acoustically treated and there might be a lot of reverb in the room. So the lower you go, the more it'll capture the sound of the kit and less sound of the reverb of the room. Now, one thing to be considerate of is the levels. Just make sure that the mic isn't clipping and that it's getting a nice sound. If the mic has a pad on it, I would probably recommend using that. As far as a mic placement for the guitar amp, I usually never put any mics right on the center of the speaker. Sometimes ribbon mics will go kind of closer to the speaker, because if you look at the frequency curve of a ribbon mic, you'll see that a lot of the high end is cut out. And so I feel sometimes to put it on the center of the speaker gives it a nice and balanced sound. However, for most mics and for a mic like the Shure SM57, I just put it at the very edge of the cone to get real like warm sound. So the next level of this would be to use two drum mics. And you may be thinking, okay, cool, we'll use two overheads now. That is a method, and a pair of mics that I recommend for that is a Rode M5, which I actually use. It's a small diaphragm condenser, and the pair comes for $200, very inexpensive. I think those are probably one of the least expensive mic pairs that I've seen on the market. I may be wrong. There might be a Sterling mic pair that's cheaper. But anyway, it gives a really nice sound, really balanced, and you can capture the whole kit with that. Now that's one option, but lately I've had actually some kind of success using a mono overhead and a middle of the kit drum. So this method I actually kind of got from Lewis Cole, who was talking about how in a masterclass that his favorite mic is a $20 early 2000s Logitech computer mic that he was using for drums, and he also used this placement. So recently I was recording some music for my wife's animation on her YouTube channel. Go check out her channel if you need some life advice. And she said she kind of wanted some kind of like lo-fi sound, and I was like, okay, let's see what I can do. So what I did for this was that I put one mono overhead between the hi-hat and the snare, because I was only using hi-hat, snare, and kick. If you're using a full kit, I would recommend using the method that I talked about a few moments ago, where you put the mono overhead above the snare and then move it around accordingly. Anyway, so you have that one mono mic, and then I got this guy. So this is an Electro Voice 635A. It's an old broadcast mic, but it's an omnidirectional polar pattern. What that means is that it's going to capture all the sound around it. If you look at the diagram, it's almost a perfect circle. So what I did with this is that I put it someplace between the kick drum and the snare. So I basically put it over the kick, and there's this little hole in the middle of the kick, and so I try to position it right there pointing at the snare. What that does is it gives a really nice defined kick and snare sound, and it provides some attack to the kick. Sometimes if you put a mic directly in front of the kick, it can get a little boomy depending on what genre you're playing. So this mic I got on eBay for I think $40-50, and it has been such a lifesaver. It actually sounds really great. So I recommend this. If you want to hear this on guitar, I have a video comparing this to an SM57, and it does a really great job actually. And then another variation is you can simply put a mic in front of the kick drum. One mic I like for this is a Sennheiser E602. It's a really great sounding mic. It retails for about $160, but it's still under the $200 budget. So the next one would be a 5 mic method. You're going to be using 2 overheads, the kick mic, the bass DI, and the guitar mic. Now for this, you're going to need a bigger interface than a 4-channel interface, but you're going to get a lot more definition. When you're using the stereo overheads, you're capturing the whole sound of the kit. I would honestly recommend this. And then for the third mic, I would honestly recommend putting it on the bass drum rather than the snare. So the way I usually arrange my overheads for this kind of setting is I have them pointed like this at the snare. I read somewhere that it's really good to have your overheads in an equilateral triangle with your snare drum. And so I basically just pointed the 2 mics towards the snare. And I found when I did that, I got enough cymbal sound, I got enough toms, I got the hi-hat even, and the snare was like pretty loud and present. So I felt that I didn't need a snare mic actually. The kick drum, however, since it's all the way on the floor and it's kind of a lower frequency, sometimes tends to get lost. Especially if the bass player is playing with a bass amp and you're not using headphones, you might lose the sound of the kick. And again, play around with the overheads to try to get a nice balance between the cymbals, toms, snare, hi-hat, etc., whatever other percussion you might have. So the next one I would recommend, 6 mics. Now we introduce a second mic on the guitar. For me, I always like to record stereo guitar because it just sounds so much more full. So for the guitar amp, I like some kind of combination of ribbon mic and dynamic mic, or ribbon mic and large diaphragm condenser. The Audio-Technica works well, the MXL works well. The ribbon mic provides some darkness and the other mic is going to provide some clarity. And I usually have the ribbon mic somewhere closer to the center of the speaker. So the next thing I'd add, which is going to make this a 7 mic setup, is going to be the stereo overheads. Plus, now we're going to introduce the snare mic. For the snare, I like to use an SM57. There's a bunch of other things you can use. You can use a large diaphragm condenser mic, but for me, the SM57 always actually works a little better. But again, try it out. Then I would still use the bass DI because it's the safest way, and bass actually sounds really good DI. And then 2 mics on the guitar. So now finally we have an 8 mic method, which is going to be probably the maximum capacity of your home studio if you're using an 8-channel interface. So there's a couple options how we can use the 8th mic. One thing that I really like to do actually, and this only works if you have a semi-hollow electric guitar like my D'Angelico, but what I like to do actually is stick a lavalier mic inside one of the F holes of my guitar. Now this is a really questionable method, but it gives a really nice acoustic response to the guitar. And it makes the guitar sound a lot more full. One big issue with it though is that since it's a really sensitive mic and I basically dangle it inside, it's kind of loose, and so any movements that I make, usually it's kind of picked up in the mic. So if I'm like moving my leg or if I'm moving to the music, it usually sounds in the mic. But that's one of the tricks that I use. I also sometimes like to put a large diaphragm condenser right up against the guitar too. That's also a kind of dangerous one though, because if you're in the same room as the drums, you're probably not going to get much of the guitar sound. It's probably going to be mostly drums in that mic. Another option you can do is use an actual mic on the upright bass. Honestly, I love using mics on upright a lot more than DI because to me DI upright sounds terrible, but sometimes with the isolation we don't have that option unless you're playing with a bass player who's playing really loud acoustically and the drummer's not playing too loud. In some scenarios it can work. In that case I usually like to put a large diaphragm condenser in front of the bridge, usually about an arm's length away. I guess it would depend on how tall you are, but somewhere around arm's length away. If you have some kind of isolation, that would be ideal. You can purchase rock wool in bulk. I believe you can get a 12 pack for $50, and then you would just need to build the frame, but that provides a really good isolation and it's cheap if you're handy and you can make the stuff at home. So the home recording industry has really blown up these days, and in 2020, especially in times of COVID, it's become somewhat essential to have a home recording studio actually. The good news is that the cost of entry is relatively low compared to what it was a few years ago. So we can actually get great sounding results right from our home, and we don't have to worry about booking studio time or booking an engineer, but it will take some skills to learn, and it'll take some gear that we're gonna have to find out how to use. So thank you so much for watching. If you found this helpful, please like and subscribe, leave a comment if you have any questions as per usual, and I hope to see you again in another video. I'm posting videos every Monday, so stay tuned. Turn on notifications if you'd like to be notified of when I release a video. So thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed. Have a good day.